But on the Assassin's Creed side, they were action adventure story games to me. And so then it was this desire, I think, amongst management to sort of squeeze more playtime out. Like the industry has these cycles of, perceived wisdom that are shared amongst the C-suite and the executive floor. And the one that was going around there was you've got to keep the disc in the tray, because basically they looked at the data, this is going back in time, but the GameStop, the resale market, which we got no money from, was basically primed to work within 2 weeks. So you wanted to keep the disc in the tray for 2 weeks. If you could do that, you could cut off 80% of resale, basically. And that stopped you losing a bunch of cash. And so they wanted to push games bigger and bigger. And then that led to a lot of bloat, where because you needed more people because you couldn't get more time, which meant that the talent was sort of diluted in the studios, and then just everything got harder, I think was a challenge. And so it was kind of the philosophy for founding Typhoon and then Raccoon, which was to try and do a segment of a AAA game instead of trying to do all of it, you know what I mean? Which would need 600 people to try and do, just the single player portion and just sort of 20 hours. Which if I said that, 20 years ago, people were like, that's a AAA game. Like, what are you talking about? And there's all this bloat that grew up, in the sort of the buffet lunch of video games, that your game needed to be a platform. That was another hot button issue. I have, everything, co-op mode and multiplayer mode.
Fortnite and Roblox.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like, I guess that's code for popular now. You know what I mean? Like, it's a platform. Like, no, people just like it, so that's what. So I think, for me, especially now with kids, I'd rather play like 5 weird games than one monster polished, mediocre game. So yeah, I like them shorter. But you won't convince an EA of that one.
Of course, yeah. All they're going to see is, are these people playing for longer? How much do you spend in a movie theater for 2 minutes? If my game is 20 hours, we should be getting that kind of money out of people. So I do appreciate, your point of view in regards to that.
Well, we learn it's another, like, the sort of Metroidvania, which is just sort of a code shorthand for lock and key design. Like you have a small space, there's a lock, you need to find a key, you get access to a bigger space, there's a new lock, and you explore. It's a nice way. I like it to tutorialize stuff. It's sort of a natural shape, and I like it. I'm a bit of a collect 'em up fanatic. I grew up on the Rare games on the Nintendo 64 as well, and sort of all those games where like. Or whether it's Skyrim or the Rare games, the desire to go to every corner of the map and find, every little secret was something I liked. And then, it just seemed we had a lot of AAA devs, so we weren't afraid of doing something in 3D. We weren't afraid of doing something, with sort of complex networking. So, because we had guys with experience, so Metroid Prime seemed like an untouched template in that subgenre.
Are there any other games, perhaps, that inspired it that people might not immediately think about?
I mean, it's sort of halfway between Far Cry 4. It's got a chunk of Far Cry 4 in it, in sort of it's a player story. We used to call it the anecdote factory on Far Cry. Like, you want the game to generate player stories. So we tried to bring a little bit of that. There's a lot more in Revenge of the Savage Planet. There's a lot more systemic base to it. Along with the potty here. So hopefully, that resonates. But no, it was more like inspired by old movies and old golden age science fiction stuff. Like the idea that you could explore, the world because it's awesome and there's other planets and they're teeming with life, before we found out there's nothing there but rocks, and we'd be stuck up there like Matt Damon eating poop mushrooms in The Martian. So like, I think it's harkening back to a more positive era.
Now it's time for our burning questions round, where our guest has 5 minutes to answer 5 randomly generated questions from the internet, including the trick question that we added in there. Sorry, I didn't tell you there was a trick question before, but there is one there. So you can be as wide or as short as with the answers as you want, buddy. So going to question 1. What type of things do you doodle?
I doodle like really weirdly crappy mechanical contraptions. So arrows and springs and coils and mechanics, just sort of random stuff while I'm in a meeting. So I'm a terrible doodler, so I probably look like I'm not listening at all. But yes, rubbish.
Sweet. Okay, cool. And then moving on to question 2 then. It's, if you could change the length of each day to make it perfect for you, how many hours would it be?
Well, I like to sleep and I like to stay up late. I reckon I'd go for 30. I reckon I go for 30 hours because otherwise what happens right now is I end up, you put the kids to bed, then the wife go to bed, then I'll start playing games, and then it's 2 a.m. And then then I'd rather sleep properly from there. So I'm cutting down on sleep time, but I probably just play longer. So yeah, let's go 30, arbitrarily 30.
I'm fully in agreement. I'm an habitual afternoon napper, which means I end up going to bed at 2 a.m. literally every morning. So like this here, I'm just there smoking at like 1:30 a.m. every night. That is literally my routine. So 30 hours sounds like a good answer. Yeah. But question 3. What memory have you been thinking about a lot lately? This one's a bit deep.
Well, that's a deep one. Well, I've been thinking I don't go back to Australia as much. I live in Montreal now in Canada, so I don't get back home as much as I would like. So I've been thinking about the family going back this year. So I've been thinking about, my dad was a sports journalist, and he wrote a lot of sort of articles about football and books about sport and travel and all that sort of stuff. So I've been thinking a lot about his career, now that he's sort of basically retired, and asking him a few questions when I get back there, just in case time is short.
Yeah, family are obviously extremely important. I live away from them myself. My mother's constantly trying to get me to move back, especially as the years go by. So it's one of those things where I think the older you get, the more you feel the drive for family.
Especially if you have kids.
Question 4. Yeah, I wish I could agree with you, but I don't have kids, so I think you're a bigger man than me when it comes to...
No.
Deadforge has kids, so no doubt he's in agreement with you. Question 4. What's the best comeback you've ever heard?
Best comeback? You're the only one who's going to get this. It was a cricket comeback between a leg spinner called Shane Warne, and I can't remember the English batsman who was batting at the time. And pardon my French in this. He said, "Shane, why are you so fucking fat?" And Shane Warne said, "Because every time I fuck your mother, she gives me a cookie."
Holy shit.
So I'll give you another one. Another cricket one, because cricket is the king of sledging. It was Ian Botham. Ian Botham said this. He said it was Glenn McGrath bowling to him, Australian bowler to a British batsman, and Glenn McGrath said, "How's your wife and my kids?" And Ian Botham said, the wife's amazing. The wife's amazing, but the kids are fucking retarded. That's terrible. Anyway, you probably want to run those ones. Two greatest comebacks I've ever heard. And they were not live. I think they were out of the broadcast, but as reported later.
Yeah, I had no idea that cricket was so dramatic, was so funny.
Yeah, the worst thing they ever did was they put a microphone in the stump so you could hear what they were saying, and they had to clean up their act. But until then, it's like baseball. Baseball's the American version. The amount of shit talk going on in baseball is shocking. It looks like, the old joke is that, rugby is a thugs game played by gentlemen, and cricket is a gentleman's game played by thugs. And I think that's always held.
Excellent. So, question 5, and I actually don't know if this is going to be one that you'll answer, so I'm curious as to see if you'll even want to answer it. If you ran Stadia, what would you have done differently?
I would have finished it. I think I would have thought very carefully about whether I wanted to move from a business, which is about making apps, like, like a service sort of apps thing, to a creative business, because creative businesses require a strong stomach and a lot of people skills. And it didn't feel like that was something that was a fit for Google. They would say things like, "We wish you would make a game that would appeal to everybody all the time." And you would say, "It's not possible. There's nothing," and it just was very difficult. And they would say things like, "People love Google Maps." And you're like, "Nobody loves Google Maps. People like that it gets them from point A to point B, but no one loves a map. It's not possible." I don't reminisce about the time I opened the map to go to my mum's house and it was right. You know what I mean? Like, it's just nonsense. So I think they need to think a little bit more carefully about where they spend time, because otherwise it's frustrating to people who might want to have actually done that.